Hello, and welcome to our conversation with the creative team behind I'm Your Woman. We'd like to thank our friends at Amazon and Strategy PR for making this conversation possible. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderator. Alison Bales is a freelance film critic and journalist. She reviews movies for WOR Radio and for www.bestmoviesbyfar.com. Allison co-hosted Lyons and Bales Real Talk for 4 years on NBC and At the Angelica for 9 years on IFC. She has appeared on the Today Show and CBS This Morning and has contributed to BBC.com, Parade.com, More, and In Touch magazines. Welcome, Allison. Welcome, panelists, and please take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Jordan and Rachel, for being with us today. It's a pleasure to talk to you. It's a pleasure to talk to you about a film that is so enjoyable and a good one, shall we say. Jordan, you're a producer, co-producer with Rachel. Can you tell us how you got involved? What point a producer would normally get involved? Obviously, on this project, you were involved from a much earlier stage. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, I've been involved since marriage. So Julia, the director of the picture, is my wife. She and I this is our fourth movie that we've made together, with her directing, us co-writing, and me producing. It's actually our fifth movie together. I produced something that she wrote, somebody else directed. But in terms of this shape of the collaboration, this is our fourth picture together. So yeah, I mean, we're always kind of generating stuff in our house. Usually, we're wearing our writer hats when we're first generating, but I definitely have trouble not thinking like a producer when I'm writing. I'm definitely always thinking about, and the way that even when Julia was writing on her own before we started working together, I was always giving her notes and thinking from the point of view of how do we make this into a movie. And that just, that's both a blessing and a curse. I can watch Julia sit down at her computer and write for days just freely. I take 2 weeks to write 10 pages because I'm always thinking about, like, how do I do this? How do I make it, with my producer hat on? So yeah, that tends to be our process. We come up with something. Julia usually has the kernel of an idea. I think what she would say is towards the end of the day, after we've been, usually the days are reserved for our work, like either stuff we're writing together, stuff I'm producing, stuff we're doing that isn't just ideas. And then at the end of the day, we'll usually sit outside after we put our kids to bed and pitch each other ideas. And this came from one of those sessions. We'd been watching right when our first kid was born. We have a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old. Right when our first son was born, we'd been watching a lot of crime dramas, and in particular Thief. And Thief, there's a scene at the end of the second act when Tuesday Weld is basically pushed out of the picture, and Julia's thought was, what if we just kind of followed that car? And that was kind of where the kernel of the idea came from. And then obviously we pulled on that thread quite a bit, and it became something else entirely. But that was really, and you can still see a lot of the DNA of that, I think, throughout the picture. But it became something else, and something that we would call our own. But that was the earliest involvement, and then that was about 6 years ago, and it's been a long road. But we wanted to be patient. We wanted to find the right actress, the right partners, the right studio partners, in order to make the movie that we were holding in our heads, and Julia was seeing. So that's kind of the story of the movie. There's obviously more to discuss, but that's the 35,000 foot view.
So we've had movies. Cinema has existed for over 100 years now, and we still don't say a male-led film, but we still do say a female-led film, and that's sort of quite important in marketing, I think, still, of a film. Rachel, you're a producer on this. Is that an important thing to say about a film still, or do we need to drop this female-led, female-oriented? Do we need to drop that from our vocabulary at this point?
I think it's both. I would love to reach the point where it's a given that movies are led by men and women, but unfortunately we're not there yet. We're not really there yet with women in any of these leadership positions. And so it does feel important and also kind of radical in a way that it shouldn't anymore with a project like this, to talk about how not only is this female led, one of the producers is a woman, the director is a woman, that there are so many women involved at all the different levels of leadership in this film. That feels like something worth championing and celebrating, and not just worth, but it is still necessary. And I can't wait until we can stop using that clarifier. Directors are women, producers are women, stars and leads are women, and they have been for a long time, but we're still working towards equity.
Yeah, I mean, can I piggyback on that actually? Because Julia definitely talks about this a lot, and she very proudly wears the mantle of female director. And I think it is about not just saying I'm a woman, I'm directing this movie, but also about being seen by other people. And I think you can extend that to any number of marginalized groups, because like, let's just say we reach the day where yes, we have some kind of parity with men and women directing, producing, starring, whatever it is, and we don't have to say that. We're still going to have to say it's a trans-led film. It's a movie about the Black experience. I think we're always going to have any number of marginalized groups, and I think it's important to say those words so that not only for the people that are doing the work, but also so that other people can feel seen inside that work, just sort of knowing and bringing that awareness to the work itself. So.
Well, and Julia also, just sorry to piggyback on that really quickly, one of the most amazing things about working with Julia as an actor and as a producer is that she is so unapologetically all of the different things that she is. She is so unapologetically female. She is so unapologetically wearing multiple hats as a wife and as a mom and as a writer and a director. And she is all of those things at once. And she's not apologizing or trying to minimize any of them. And that's been really inspirational. She brings a different energy to her work. And I think it's one of the things that makes her so great. And it also brings out a different side of, and I would argue sometimes a better side of, or a richer side of so many of the different people that she works with.
So Rachel, what inspired you then to sign on as a producer as well? If you could talk about the producer hat and as playing Jean.
Yeah, well, I knew that I wanted to play Jean from the very first time I read the script, and I like to read a script more than once before I say yes, but from the first time I absolutely knew that I wanted to play this role. Had the great fortune of getting to sit down with Julia and talk with her about Jean and about this world and about what inspired the film, and writing with Jordan and their working partnership. And then these two nerds very generously offered to let me step into this role alongside them for the first time. It was, becoming a producer is something that I'd been interested in for quite a while and hadn't necessarily seen the right path forward yet, or a project that I felt excited by enough to step into that role on, and partners who were excited to share that space with me. And to Jordan's credit, Jordan's an incredibly experienced producer, as you pointed out, could absolutely have produced this film solo. And also, he and Julia have this incredibly special working partnership with a history. But they are people who put their money where their mouth is constantly. When they talk about making a more inclusive workplace, elevating people into leadership positions, they really do it. And Jordan not only took me under his wing and was a mentor for me through this process, but also gave me the space to find my own voice as a producer and to really earn that seat at the table. And that's a gift worth shouting from the rooftops, and more people should take Jordan's lead on this.
Let's talk about the period a little bit. For me, the 70s feels just like yesterday, frankly. My childhood was in the 70s, but for you, it's long ago. It's a real period piece. How did you find the character of Jean? Both physically and emotionally, I guess, because she's so different from Mrs. Maisel, which is what we've seen you in most recently, who's so verbal and so hyperactive. And suddenly you're playing a character who really doesn't really even speak that much.
Yeah, it was a bit of a relief in some ways to get to find a character who lived more in stillness and in silence, and who spoke less verbally and also less with her body. It was a challenge by the same token, having spent, as you said, a couple of years embodying someone completely different. But in terms of the period, I have the benefit of playing someone for whom every scene is new, and that is timeless. Someone who has been kept in the dark, someone who remains so sheltered. Everything is new, and it makes it my job to try to, as honestly as possible and with a lot of work done about, you know, who Jean is and where she came from before we meet her on screen, to be as present as possible. And if that if I needed some help there, a baby will make you as more present than you've ever been, especially when they are your scene partner in nearly every frame.
Well, without any disrespect to your performance, I do think the babies need to have Oscars.
Yeah.
They were phenomenal.
Yeah, those babies are good.
Yeah.
I mean, when we were writing it, and we were writing so much baby into the script, we definitely knew we were going to have to find the right, and you know, it's a set of twins, Justin and Jameson. Not only find a set of twins that were exactly right and up for the task. I mean, how do you know if baby's up for the task? You just sort of feel it. But also their mother was an enormous part of our process, and she was an incredible partner for us and for Julia and Rachel in particular. You know, Julia, us having, again, 2 small children, and Rachel having done a lot of work with kids on Maisel, it was really awesome to watch all those relationships form. I mean, the babies were, I think, the first thing we did when we got to Pittsburgh. Many weeks out, we started the call for, you know, babies. Our casting directors in Pittsburgh, you know, put out a bunch of stuff to say, we're looking for babies for a movie. And from, I think, the first photograph of Justin and Jameson, and then when they came into the room, we knew they were the ones. They were 6 months old when we started, and they were 8 months old, 8.5 months old by the time we finished. And it's really, you don't really realize the evolution of them. We shot a lot of stuff, not exactly in order, but pretty sequentially. We shot the movie. Yeah, mostly sequentially. Certainly their aging over the course of the film is sequential. Like, their stuff was very sequential. And that was done very intentionally. And, you know, it's interesting. I don't personally feel it when I'm watching the movie, but if you look at the first frame of the movie and the last frame of the movie, which is pretty much their first and last day shooting, they're very different. Very different babies.
They became people in front of our eyes. They could hardly, the first time Marcia, Stephanie, and I met the babies, I think I met them first, and then Marcia, Stephanie came in later that same day.
Yeah.
And the first time we met them, they couldn't lift their heads very well on their own. And by the end, you know, there's a brilliant video somewhere of Julia and I holding one of their legs while he scooted across the table.
The table in the cabin, yeah.
I mean, I don't have children, and I've never spent that much time with a baby watching them grow. And I think it does add this layer to the film that was so unexpected for all of us. There were moments that were really important to us that we couldn't shoot because, you know, babies don't know that they're in a movie, and they don't know that they're acting, and they don't care. And then there were some things that we never could have imagined that we would get that added this urgency and magic to certain scenes.
Jordan, let's talk about the genre of the film, a crime drama. What in your mind are the essential elements of a crime drama, and how does this film respect them and perhaps exceed them or subvert them?
That's interesting. I mean, you know, the essential elements of a crime drama are no, you know, they're not that different from the essential elements of any like thrillery kind of picture about, you know, we took the inciting incident of, like, you're woken up in the middle of the night, you have no idea what's going on, right? Like that I think is that element of surprise early on in a movie that kind of throws you into a new world, I think is for us a very important element of that type of drama. Like, you know, in any of the other movies that we were talking about, there's the, you know, the criminal who's released from prison, the person who's invited into a new and bigger job, you know, whatever it is that's that inciting incident that throws you into this new world. So I think that was definitely a guiding principle. And then there's just the idea of who knows what and when, and the way information travels is always a really big piece of those movies. And that was something that we really wanted to dig into, and was sort of a guiding principle in writing, in shooting, and then also in editorial, was really staying true to Jean's perspective. Like, when in doubt, we were like, well, what does Jean know? And how does Jean feel? And let's just go right there. That was always something that we came back to when we had an issue or a problem, or something we were trying to solve. That was the first question we would ask. So we tried to stay true to those ideas. But then, something that also is in a lot of these movies were bigger set pieces, car chases and gunplay and elements of danger and violence. And we knew we wanted to have those, but we wanted to, instead of presenting them up front, we wanted to build to them and get to a place where we found our movie intersecting with those movies. So we did a lot of work early on when we were writing the movie of sort of writing the story that was happening on top of our movie, and saying, okay, where is Eddie? Where is Cal? Where are all these people? And what are they doing in this other version of the movie while Jean is having her story? And then where do those things intersect? And how are we not just intersecting them, but also staying true to the different perspective of our protagonist, to Jean's perspective? How are we telling this set piece in a way that feels, as you said, somewhat subverted and somewhat different than the way it would have been presented in one of those pictures? So those were sort of the guiding principles that kept us honest, and we just kind of went from there.
Well, it's interesting because watching it as a woman, I thought the car chase was very exciting, but I was totally happy not to see any of the gunfighting. And there is, there's murder and shootouts, a couple. We don't really see them, but we see the aftermath.
Yeah.
And I wondered whether that was an intentional, whether, first of all, it was from the female perspective, that perhaps women don't really enjoy gunfights quite as much as men. I don't know if that's too simplistic, but also maybe a female perspective in that the film shows the aftermath and the horror of it, rather than the sort of glamorous excitement of the moment. Rachel, as a producer, was that something that appealed to you? Did you talk about that at all?
Yeah, definitely. Julia and I talked quite a bit about Jean's role in this more traditional and male-dominated space. And one of the things that I love about this character, and I think it takes a lot of confidence as writers and as a director to let it play out this way, but is that Jean doesn't become an overnight badass. A gun doesn't get put in her hand and then she suddenly, after one lesson, knows how to shoot it and kills all the men and can hang with the best of them. This really is a story that feels more true to Jean's experience. Jean is petrified with a gun in her hand. We see her shooting multiple times and still, not really getting there. She gets there when it counts, but it's not glamorous. And she, while it is a turning point in her story, it's not a moment when she realizes her like superhuman strength in the same way that I think we've seen other predominantly male protagonists experience in similar situations, whether it be in this genre, in a superhero movie, and I really appreciated that, both as someone who loves movies and also as the person occupying this role.
Right. So Jordan, we don't have a huge amount of time left, but could you perhaps talk about the rest of the cast and your decisions in casting such great actors? Really.
Yeah, we can talk about, I think, like Marcia Stephanie and Arinze and Frankie. It was really important, you used the word aftermath. And I think that is, it's so appropriate because the whole movie is in many ways about the aftermath and the wreckage left by the often violent lives lived by men, and things that are sometimes not considered in the heat of that violence. And where do things go after, right? Like what is the emotional truth of those things? So, not just his wife, who is sent off on the run, but also his associate, a Black man, who is kind of left to the sides, and his significant other, a Black woman, and a Black family who was living their lives in the 70s, and those tensions of race. We made a decision to kind of tell the story of all of these outsiders, and of these outsiders necessarily having to find community in each other in order to find strength to move forward. Marcia Stephanie Blake was somebody that we, Julie and I, knew about. She was on our radar, but when Rachel first read the script, one of the first things she said to us was, Marcia Stephanie Blake should play Terry. And she was right. We got to casting, and eventually it was like, yeah, Marcia Stephanie Blake should play Terry. And then with Cal, Arinze is a sensationally good actor, was totally unknown to me before we started this casting process. He's done a lot of stage work in the UK, and is pretty well known there for some work he did. But was unknown to us, and our casting director saw him in Death of a Salesman there, right? Is that what it was, Rachel? I think it was Death of a Salesman.
I think so, yeah. Carly and Candace were familiar with his work already, and had brought us a number of great actors, but Arinze was just one. He just had all of the things that make Cal in him at the same time. And
it had that, again, just going back to that idea of staying in Gene's perspective, like Arinze is pretty unknown to audiences. So I think this idea of, because we talked about more named actors for that Cal role, and then we talked about, other people that were a bit of discoveries, and we eventually decided that it made most sense for the narrative underpinnings of the story for Cal to be a little bit more of a unknown quantity, and for us to learn him, for us as an audience to learn about him in much the same way that Gene's character does of Cal.
Yeah, I'm sure he won't be unknown for very long. He was phenomenal.
I hope not.
No, he was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Rachel, in conclusion, then let's talk a little bit more about Gene, because it occurred to me that different time periods, decades apart, but there's a similarity with Mrs. Maisel in a way, which is these are women who are sort of forced out on their own, and they have to face their own independence, their survival. There's a lot of similarities there. Would you agree? Very different, but some similarities.
Yeah, absolutely. In some ways, they're polarly opposite. And as an actor, they felt so different in both in the development of the characters and also to embody them ultimately. I think the thing that they share is that they're both women who are discovering a power inside of them that has always been there. And one of the things that I love about Gene's story in particular is that Gene is a relatively ordinary woman who has this incredible power, because all women do, and she discovers it along the way, frame by frame by frame. And I love stories about people, and as a woman in particular, about women, ordinary women who are thrust into extraordinary circumstances, and appreciate in both projects that the path towards what may ultimately be some kind of self-actualization is never linear, is messy and fraught, and they are deeply flawed in different ways. But that in both projects, these women at the center are allowed the space to take that journey, as different as they are.
Well, thank you very much. I didn't say at the beginning, but I want to say now that this film had me from the very beginning. It's such a great start to a movie. It grabs you. I was scared for Gene. I was terrified for the baby. It's a great ride to go on. So I thank you very much for joining us here today. And on behalf of the Producers Guild of America, good luck with the film, and so long.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.